to keep going. So here we are with the Idaho Reentry Summit on housing. The purpose of this is really to discuss what's going on in housing right now, you know, where we've come from, some of the things that are coming down the pipeline, and what the future holds. So hopefully I can get technology to work, and I'll tell you a few things that I know. So where we're at today. Prison releases are up 5% this year over last year. They've let over 900 men and women out of prison since COVID appeared in Idaho. So that's March. And they've reduced the population by 900. They've utilized at least some of the 12 million that the Department of Corrections has received in pandemic response funding to pay for some housing for parolees. And especially for those who contracted COVID and needed a place to stay. But generally, the Department of Correction has budgeted over $250,000 for transitional housing for next year. So that's just some of the numbers we're at right now. Admissions to prisons are down due to COVID-19. Everybody I talk to expects to see an uptick in admissions because courts have been closed, so the trials haven't been necessarily going on. So once they resume, there will be people going back. That there's been a hold on that right now. Everything says that we're going to need 1,000 new beds by 2025. Well, if you add 1,000 new prison beds, then you're probably going to have an increase in releases that correlate with that. So more people incarcerated and more people getting out of incarceration. So where are we at in the Treasure Valley? Well, the lay of the land right now is that home prices have more than doubled in the last 10 years. We've all been talking about that for a long time. Only 2% of apartments in Boise right now rent for less than $700 a month. So affordability is an issue for everyone. And the average rent in Boise has increased in the last year to $1,185. So rent is pretty high for the kind of people that are getting out of incarceration. 34% of participants of Jesse Tree, which is a local nonprofit organization that tries to keep people housed, 34% have a criminal record as a barrier to their housing. So we've seen the city of Boise has implemented 2 housing programs to address some chronic homelessness, because homelessness has become a problem as we see housing affordability decrease. So right now, the transitional housing beds dedicated exclusively to persons who are transitioning from incarceration is about 600 dedicated beds. So the things that we kind of want to talk about here are the roles of transitional housing providers, some of the new aspects of transitional housing like case management, drug and alcohol specialists, life skills coaches, employment assistants, things like that. And some of the whisperings that are going on amongst several circles are just some ideas about safety. I know that a lot of communities have actually enacted ordinances that restrict housing, transitional housing placement, or have tried to restrict at least, due to safety issues. The community members have discussed accountability, and I think even the IDOC has discussed some sort of regulations regarding transitional housing. So that's kind of where we are at as far as where we've been, what's coming down the pipeline, and the discussion on shaping the future. What does that really look like? So I guess I'll send it over to Eddie. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's kind of the focus of the day. I would like to just get a really brief introduction of everybody so we know who's at the table today.
Sounds good to me. Does anybody want to go first?
I mean, I'll just, I joined BarNone, right after the initial release party, and we just want to move forward on, let's find some ideas on how we can make all this work.
Yeah, I definitely think my focus as someone who's actually been involved in some of this stuff is to find ways to work with the existing players to reduce recidivism, increase community participation, because I think that's key, and just find new solutions, discuss the possibilities that are out there, because the way we've been doing it hasn't been great, and everybody's been looking at new ways to do it. And I think if we can bring a lot of players to the table to discuss those things, then that means we can get more done. I guess, I hope so. Next.
I'll go. My name is Bruce Wellsmore. I'm the Deputy Chief of Probation and Parole. I was hired about 10 weeks ago, so it's like drinking out of a fire hose with everything going on with COVID and stuff. So loving the position. I'm excited to be here. This department's really moving in a great direction. So I was pleased that you're having the summit so close to me coming in, so that I can kind of take part in that and see what the needs are and hear people's concerns.
You're too modest. You've been around a long time. You know a lot of things.
Well, I know a little bit about a lot of things,
Okay.
but I appreciate you saying that.
Great.
I've been with the department about 20 years. So I've worked in CRCs, I've worked at the institutions, I've worked with both male and female facilities. So I do feel like I've got a pretty well-rounded, my background is social work. So I bring that to the table, probably gears me more towards the client aspect. And then CRCs, I think I really enjoyed that job, helping people transition from the facilities out into the communities and back to their families. So anyway, just glad to be part of the summit. So thank you.
Absolutely.
And I'm Tim Lay. I'm the reentry manager for the Department of Correction. Been in the job for about 2.5 years now, after spending about 20 years at the Department of Labor, working with returning citizens now for probably close to, I don't know, 17, 18 years total time. So I've had a lot of experience in creating various reentry type programs for employment, as well as a lot of reentry programs that's going on now within the department. So again, I've been around the block a few times. Glad to be here.
Welcome.
Hi, this is Maura Lynch. I'm the District 4 Probation Manager. And thanks for inviting me. I'm just here to listen to what everybody has to say.
Love that background. Wish we
I'm
were
Ken
all
Winnick.
there.
I'm the Executive Director at Supportive Housing and Innovative Partnerships. I've been involved with Supportive Housing since 2008. I know a few of you. I know Tim pretty well. We've talked on many occasions. I'm here to get some new ideas, because I know that some of the stuff we're doing is working, but some of it ain't. So I'm hoping this is open some new doors. So
Welcome.
I'm Jay Christensen. I'm the warden at the Idaho State Correctional Center. I've been the warden there for just a little over 2 years. Prior to that, I'd worked multiple positions. Mostly, majority of my time was spent as deputy warden at the majority of the facilities south of Boise. And I've been with the department since the summer of 1989.
Welcome.
My name is Jenny Ricks, and I own Safe Release Housing. I've had them since 2017, and I'm just here to listen and get some information.
Welcome.
Everyone, my name is Charlene Taylor. I am a criminal justice researcher and consultant. I work in the nonprofit space for an organization called the National Council on Crime and Delinquency. I do work around risk assessment and program development and evaluation around the country, and I'm just here to listen and find out about some of the reentry things that are happening here locally in Idaho.
My name's Annie Munoz. I'm a reentry specialist with District 4 Parole and Probation. I work under Tim Lay in Moira. And yeah, I think you've hit on a lot of the big needs. So I'm excited just to be a part of this and collaborate together to find solutions.
Hi, my name is Shirley O'Neill. I'm the Director of Community Partnerships in the Office of the Mayor for the City of Boise, and I'm just here to listen and learn.
Hey Shirley, how are you?
Hi, good to see you again.
Yeah.
Hi.
And I'm, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. My name is Jenna White, and I'm the owner of White Pines Transitional Housing in Nampa. We're fairly new. We've been open maybe a year and a half, and so I'm here to listen to new ideas and how to further our services with the community and how to be more involved. So.
Great. I love to hear that.
And I'm Laurel McMahon. I'm the Workforce Programs Operations Manager at the Department of Labor. So I manage our local offices and mobile staff who work with partners around the state, working with people who are formerly incarcerated. And we have some specific grants that help with that, but then most of our workforce grants could allow us to partner with many of you from the descriptions that you've provided. So excited to see how we can contribute and continue a partnership that I think already exists in a lot of places, but could probably be strengthened as well. Also, I do have to leave early, so if you see me drop off, it's not because I lost interest or decided that I didn't want to hear anything else.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is that everyone?
I'll throw out an introduction. My name is Cole Ivancic, and Lucas Peterson is here with me as well. We are two interns with Ken at Ship Housing.
Awesome. All right, so I guess I'll start with, oh, Cheryl. I forgot you, Cheryl, I'm sorry.
That's okay, I arrived late at the party 3 different times. I am Cheryl Miller, and I do veterans advocacy work. Oftentimes, our veterans who are reentering really struggle, and so I am here to continue to develop my little Rolodex database of those who can assist our veterans.
All right. It's always a pleasure. So I guess we'll touch bases a little bit on transitional housing. I think most people here know what transitional housing here is that's here. Transitional housing in the Valley, the Treasure Valley, can range anywhere from somebody having a house where people who get out of incarceration go to live, pretty similar to an apartment or any normal arrangement. And some of them have programs and services, and there's a pretty wide variety of those. Some are managed, some are not particularly managed, and some are large, some are small. And so there's no one great definition for transitional housing in the Valley, which is actually maybe a great discussion, because the feasibility of implementing services or coordinating services for someone who runs a small facility is just not as practical for someone who runs a large facility or several homes. So maybe there's some partnership opportunities there or discussion there for collaboration. But people come out of incarceration, and a lot of times they don't know exactly where they're going to go. So they're sitting in, they've been granted a parole date, or they're thinking about getting their parole date, and the option of going home doesn't exist for one reason or another. So they are given this list, or they might sit with their case manager and look at this list of transitional housing providers. And it's actually not a small list. It's a fairly decent sized list, depending on which district you're going to go to. I mean, we're talking about District 3 and District 4 here, so that's usually pretty decent sized list of transitional housing providers. So I guess you pick which one you think would be the best fit for you, and you send in an application that you get through your case manager, and more often than not, you are selected, and then you start making the preparations for when you get out. A lot of times, The Department of Corrections, as part of that process, will look at how much money you've had sent into you, how much money you've earned at your correctional employment, and determine if you're eligible for assistance from the state to pay for that. And a lot of times people are. So the Department of Corrections coordinates with sending off a check to this housing provider, and the magic wand is sent off. You are released. So the Parole Commission grants you your release, the Department of Corrections coordinates it, and a case manager, Mark Rennick, someone comes and picks you up and takes you to your transitional home. So once you get there, my experience is there's a chance that you will have toilet paper and laundry soap and things like that, and you'll be all right. They'll come and meet with you and sit down with some expectations. Likely you'll sign a contract, and depending on which kind of house you go to, that might kind of be the extent to your interactions with them. They might come and drop in randomly every once in a while just to say hi, make sure that everything looks right, and then come and collect the rent at the end of the month. So there are other programs where it's a little bit more intensive, a little more detailed, and they'll provide you with rides, connect you with resources for employment and things like that. So transitional housing exists. Most communities have them. Some communities have more than others. And in my hope, my hope is that transitional housing would be the last stop in what we come to call the cycle of incarceration. So I'm hoping that the discussion we have today gets us a little bit further to that being the last place people go before they leave the cycle and they don't come back. Fingers crossed, high hopes, prayers that that is the last stop. So I would love to facilitate conversations about what it takes to get there and what that might look like. Do you have any thoughts on that, Eddie?
I'm just, as we're working through this process of having a conversation, I'm just curious from those of you that are running some of these transitional homes, you made the comment that some things are working, some things aren't. I'd like to kind of start with that. What's working, what's not working?
One of the things that we see, we run several different types of programs. Some of our veterans programs have funding for 6 months to 2 years, and some of our ESS programs have 6 months funding with a follow-up BPA funding for 6 months. And what we see is, and this is something I've actually been looking into, I'd like to do a little bit of a research and get some data in the success rate from the people that don't have the stress of having to find funding to stay in housing past that first month. I know we get the transitional funds, it's 30 days, but when they come into the housing, it takes them 2 weeks to get acclimated, and then they got to try to find a job, and then they got to have the money for their first month for the private pay rent within that 2 weeks. And you guys know as well as I do that the stress of them coming out with their history, a lot of times they want to go back to what they know and what they are comfortable with, which is what got them there in the first place. So I see the success rates in our ESS houses and our veterans programs that are far and above our transitional housing. Our transitional housing houses tend to be a revolving door because, and I think a lot of that has to do with the stress of never knowing whether they're going to have a roof over their head from this month to the next month to the next month. And I know a couple years back, we used to get 2 months worth of transitional housing funding, and that was a godsend. It gave them the chance to get their feet on the ground, get established, give them a month's worth of actual real work before they had to start taking that responsibility on their own. And I know funding's tight. I understand that. I knew that. I know that's why they backed off on it. But I see the difference in that with our clients across the board. It's one of our top discussions in here. If we could get some more time for them to get established, I think that would be a big step for that recidivism rate to drop, because it gives them the opportunity to move forward and establish themselves in the community.
kind of to go off of what he was just saying, not only do they come out and they need the 2 weeks to get acclimated with what they have to do with classes, but a lot of them coming out don't have an ID yet, so they have to make an appointment, and then it takes them 14 days to get an ID, and then to get the ID, you have to have a hard copy to go up and get a Social Security card, so then you have to wait for the Social Security card before they can even go get a job. So now we're a month out before they can even start working, and then they have to wait 2 weeks before they can get a first paycheck to be able to pay. So the first 30 days is just them doing the paperwork to be able to get a job. So I noticed with the females in my house, that is one of their hugest concerns, is they don't have a way to go get a job because they don't have the paperwork to be able to start the job. The first day getting out is one of their biggest stressors, is because they don't know what they're going to do for the next following month of housing or how they're going to pay it.
So if I might add a couple of things on that. One is that just as COVID hit, we had gotten an MOU with the Social Security Administration office. And so we have started issuing Social Security cards to inmates prior to release. COVID it's kind of slowed the process just because there's no movement allowed in the facilities right now. So that has been a bit slow. The same thing with the ID cards. We started issuing ID cards a little over a year ago, and the goal of the department is to get IDs for everybody as they leave. There are some people in the system right now, because it does cost some money to get the ID cards. We're at this point, we don't have the budget to give them for free. Because we are working with ITD to do that. And there are some people that refuse to get their IDs for various reasons. So we're working to try to make sure that everybody does leave the facilities with their I-9 documentation. That is a goal of the department. That's a goal of mine, to try to make that happen. So we are working really hard to do that. And again, in the last 6 months, I know that we've not been as successful because of the lack of movement, and obviously COVID has kind of put a wrench in a lot of things. But you know, I know that's an issue, and I know that's a concern, but we're trying to fix that as we move forward.
So that actually leads me to a question, because I've talked to the director about this issue, and he said what you said. I asked him about the funding component, so I'd actually like to get your opinion on it if you're willing to share it. He thought that it was important for people who actually had the money to buy their IDs themselves, and sometimes they don't want to spend that money. I actually talked with Representative Wintro from District 19, and she said she could make the money appear in the budget to get everybody an ID at no cost. And so I'm just wondering, where do you fall on that spectrum? Do you think we should just get a line item that says, listen, let's just implement an ID program so everybody has one? Or should we make the people who can afford them pay for them, because that's what normal people have to do when they're responsible?
So I've had the same discussion with Representative Wintro, so I know her feelings are pretty strong about that. And that's basically a decision of the director, and with legislation for, you know, if they're going to make a line item to pay for those or not. So yeah, that's a discussion that has taken place. I don't know where that discussion is going to go at this point in time, but I know that discussion's taken place.
For the housing providers, I guess that would be a great question for you perhaps, is do you see the value in, as both a taxpayer and also as a transitional housing provider, do you think that it would be useful for the legislature to provide the funding for that program so that everyone gets an ID when they get out? Or do you think that there's a component of being responsible for yourself, and if you have $100 on your books, that you should pay for the $30 ID? Or I guess if you want to get the full-blown driver's license,
for the ID, the ID is only $10.
Oh, so the ID is only $10. A full-blown driver's license would be more.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we can't do driver's license inside the facilities. because we don't have the equipment for the photo and that kind of a thing. So ITD has stated that potentially in the future, we may get the equipment to be able to do the driver's licenses, but for right now, we can't offer that. So it's $10 for an ID card.
Well, that's great to know.
Free.
That's great to know.
So
Go ahead, Jenny, I'm sorry.
So I feel like it's a very big need of the women coming out into our houses. It helps them be able to get employment, to be able to apply for different needs that they have to have, such as their children or themselves. There also is a program down at the homeless shelter that will help them pay for it if they do not have it when they get out. They will give them a $10 check. It's at Corpus Christi, and they will give them a check to go get their ID for $10. We also have helped them take them to go get it, because I feel like it is a very big need if they do not have that income. So I do feel that if we could put that into budget and they're able to get that prior to coming out, that it would help them take off a little bit of that stress with their housing and their other needs that they need.
I agree totally, because that's the first step to self-sufficiency, is once they have that, it gives them that opportunity. I mean, I know in our stores we hire a lot of people out of our houses, but we can't put them to work if they don't have any ID. So when Tim and them put that in play early before COVID, I thought it was one of the greatest things they'd ever did out there. I thought, this is the step in the right direction that we needed to do. And I understand, I can see how COVID can put a hamper on that. But I think that to me, that for the $10 per person, the dividends in the long run, again, a lot of times they look at the money spent today and they worry about that. But I think in the long run, I think that the money spent today would 10-fold or 20-fold or 100-fold appreciate by having them having the opportunity to get out and actually get employed.
If I can talk about something when it comes to that, I think maybe Bruce can recall this. When you were a program manager over at SIC, I remember we took the one car that that had been there for a while unused, and we kind of started using case managers and making appointments with the DMV, taking several people down at the same time. If they didn't have a driver's license, then they would have to go take a test. So what we were doing is we were making those appointments to go down and take that test. The offenders were actually paying for their own driver's license. And I venture to guess we were probably doing in the area of 5 to 6 a month. The case managers were taken down and taking them on their test drives and stuff. And we felt it was a valuable program, but where we had to get stopped on that is because the risk management said we could not use the state vehicles in that manner. And it's just little roadblocks like that. Does it seem to stop stop progress and things that I think are very valuable. And the frustration of standing at the DMV, I mean, you've talked to people that gone in to get their STAR card or get their ID and have to sit in line, and then when they get up to the counter, they find out they don't have the right documentation, and all of that just combined is extreme frustration. And think about it for somebody that's been incarcerated for many, many years. And so it just exasperates everything. I think what Tim has done with getting the identifications and Social Security cards, I think that's a great big step in the right direction. I think we can expand on the good that we're doing to kind of take over that bad that seems to, comes in. And I also feel like this is just kind of a piece of the puzzle. The housing is, the ID is. Tim and I have had conversations about the clothes they wear when they go out of the facility. They leave my facility in these gray looking sweats that you can't walk into the job interview in. However, my facility has been budgeted in the past for putting scrubs on everybody. Well, you can't send them out in scrubs either, So we send them out in these horrible looking sweats that they're just not appropriate for anything but, shopping at Walmart in the middle of the night. We have purchased a shed to put clothes in, and I've got a lot of people saying that they're, you know, they're going to donate some clothes. And so we're going to find some ways around that. But then COVID hit, and it seems I can't even get a shed built anymore, you know. So I think just all of these things are a piece of the puzzle, and we just need to find workarounds to make sure that we're doing these correctly and get them all done. The identification, I mean, right from the clothes they leave, to the identification they need to apply for a job, the jobs, and then there's vocational training to talk about there, the housing, and the success that they feel at the end of the month being able to pay all their bills. So you know, that's my 2 cents, is I think all of these things are great pieces of the puzzle, but we need to find a way to pull them all together.
I think that's a really great point. I think that that's kind of what we hope to facilitate. Is there's a lot of things going on, and some people know who these people are that are doing this, and over here you know who these people are doing that. But it'd be great to just let everybody know what everybody is trying to do, so that maybe there can be some more conversations going on, and maybe we can get more clothes donated, or maybe we can I don't know if we can get you a shed built, but we could put some pressure on people who know people who can get you a shed built. I don't know. And so that's,
I've already purchased the shed, and I've got a place to build it. But then I'm short on the workers that are going out and working in the facilities to put it up, and that has been my roadblock for the last few months since I got the shed. But man, all the way up to the director. The director says he's got old suits he'll donate, you know, and so do I. And
Hey, Annie, can you talk a little bit about what you guys are doing at the Reentry Center?
Yeah, so I didn't know when to jump in, but what I was going to say is some of the things that we work on at the One Stop Reentry Center as reentry specialists is really addressing basic needs first, because people will come in so overwhelmed about what we're talking about now, housing, jobs, but man, if they don't know where they're going to get their food by the end of the day, it's really hard to focus on a job. So when they come in and they are wearing their gray sweats and they don't know what they're going to eat for the day or anything, we kind of just try to sit down and talk with them if they're not assigned to our caseload already. That's kind of another thing, but we kind of just meet them where they are, make sure we can get them set up with food stamps and Medicaid. That's all done over the phone now with COVID, so it's a way easier process than it's been in the past. And then we have food boxes that we give them right away. We work really closely with St. Vincent de Paul they've helped people get cell phones right out the gates, which has been awesome during coronavirus. And once they leave, we try to set up a follow-up appointment. So we work closely with like an employment coordinator through St. Vincent de Paul. We refer a lot of people to Department of Labor and try to get them an actual workforce consultant. So it's like a direct handoff. So there's a lot of things we try to address, but it's so overwhelming that first day. So really making sure like their food needs are met, and then getting that clothing voucher, and then making that follow-up appointment. And usually the people on our caseload, we try to make sure they have their ID and social security card. If they are just like a walk-in, then that's a process we work on with Corpus Christi. We'll get those vouchers, or St. Vincent de Paul's been really good. So again, I think it's about addressing those basic needs first, so we can focus on those big needs.
And if I might add to what Annie's saying as well, is we're trying to really work harder to address the needs of individuals. So kind of going above what Annie was saying, we just actually brought on an individual, Title V person from Easter Seals, who is going to be helping people to that further step as far as some life skills, helping them to go to the grocery store to learn how to shop, helping them to learn how to do banking, helping them to get to different appointments that they might need, walking them through the Social Security process and all this. So we're working to try to expand what we are able to do. I also just had a meeting prior to this one where I'm meeting with the Veterans Administration staff. They're trying to create more of a one-stop at the VA. So on the veterans side of the house, we're trying to work with that. On the employment side, Laurel and I have a meeting this afternoon. Department of Labor has some funding for youth programs, 18 to 24. We have a large population that fits that need. So we're actually going to be having a labor person working out of our one-stop center to help and work with and get connections with people that would be eligible and appropriate for the Workforce Innovative and Opportunity Act program. So we have a lot that we're really trying to do to help people as they reenter the community. Again, in addition to St. Vincent, we have a grant through Desiree Industries for clothing. So we're trying to meet the needs of individuals to get them where they need to go. And as we grow at our One Stop, which by the way, we did get a 1-year extension to our grant. So our facility and the reentry specialists have another year through September 21 to continue the services that we are providing. So we're trying really hard, and the department is listening to the suggestions that you all provide to us, and we're trying to just to make it a little bit better and to help people reintegrate back into the community. So I just got to say, you know, we are listening, and you know, we're trying really hard to meet the needs the best that we can.
Laurel, I'll just follow up on what Tim said as well with referring to the youth program. So it is youth ages 18 to 24. And we typically over the last couple of years have not been able to even come close to spending all the money that we have in the youth program. And the needs that we meet from that are all of the supportive services that you're talking about. So we do gas assistance, we do clothing, we do GED, we do credentials beyond GED, including books and the whole wraparound services that go along with that. And again, we just, at this point, have not been able to find the number of youth that we need to fully utilize that program. So we actually ended up getting money recaptured this past program year because we are struggling so hard to find the youth, and knowing that there's so many people that you're working with that are in that population. We do have adult and dislocated worker grants also, but we tend to spend those a little more readily. But the youth program, if any of you are working with people up to the age of 24, we have money throughout every region in the state that we are looking to utilize as effectively as possible. And having come out of incarceration, they're automatically going to be eligible for our program. Typically, we've had, I would say, a laborious enrollment process. And so I've worked really hard with our career planners over the past 2 years and instituting the same thing that I just heard talked about, that meet them where they are. So if they don't have identification, that used to be a stopping point for enrollment, but I've worked closely with the career planners to say, make that their first goal. Go ahead and get them enrolled. I know we're supposed to have that before you hit that enroll button, but if you know that that's going to be the first goal and that's something you can reach, work with them right there. That's been a little bit harder to get that happening across the state because people really want to see those documents before they hit enroll, because that's the way it's always been done. So if you are working with any career planners and you're hearing that that enrollment process is still laborious and that people aren't able to get in, please reach out to me at the Department of Labor, and I can make my contact information available for everyone after this. But I would love to hear about that and work to overcome those barriers early in the process and know what offices that might still be happening in so that it can be easier for people to transition into our programs and get the support that they need, because I don't want to give money back. So help us find the people, and then we think we can work to alleviate that. And looking really forward to having a workforce consultant in the reentry center, as Tim was saying, to again, ease that transition and get people in our programs.
I actually think that's a really great discussion. I know that our next summit is going to be on employment, and it's probably going to be in January, and that'll be when the legislature is starting to come into session. And I know that the ACLU is going to be working with some of us as partners to push the Fair Chance Employment Act again to try and reduce barriers on employment applications. So I think it'll be great to come back and touch bases on that. Hopefully everybody took down some of that information, and we'll get in touch with you, because if what we hear everywhere, and I think all of us have heard it many times, is the funding is not there. There's never enough money. And so it's great to hear
someone. For us.
It's there, come and use it. Nobody hears that, so I hope people wrote your name down. I wanted to go back to something that was said earlier about the stress of coming out of incarceration and having to juggle all of this. So one of my dreams, and I think One Stop has done a kind of a great job of it post release, is, you know, combining all this stuff into one spot. So someone gets out and we can find them a ride. That's not difficult to do these days. So they get taken to the One Stop and somebody's going to try and help them piece together all the pieces of this puzzle. So I love that. But I've always wondered, and maybe some of you guys can contribute your thoughts on this, if they're, like with the ID, why go get your ID when you get out when you can get it before you get out? That helps you. Social Security card, same thing. Now we don't have to go track that down. And I just wondered if there are other opportunities for that, say with food stamps or things like that, where we know you're going to qualify for that the day you're released. Can we get you qualified for even more programs before you get out? Or in the case of the youth program, is there a way to have that pre-qualification process completed before you ever get out? That way, the day you get out, you're there.
So on that, I'll speak to that, and then Laurel probably will be able to add more to that. But what we're trying to do between Department of Labor and Department of Correction with that program is we're actually going to, and Laurel and I, again, we're going to be meeting this afternoon to talk more details, but just as a 30,000 foot view here is we're going to have an individual that I'm going to hire. It's going to be a liaison with labor. That person's going to be able to go out into all the prisons to meet with these individuals. And I'm hoping that the labor person will also be able to go out to the facilities. And basically my vision would be that they can't enroll, and Laurel will have to correct me if this has changed. They can't really enroll until they're actually out, but we can do all the paperwork and everything and have it to where when they walk out the gate, they can get enrolled right away. So we're trying hard to get them connected prior to release. I've had several meetings with some businesses and some construction employers that are willing to go to the prisons to conduct interviews so that we can actually have potential job offers prior to release to go along with the WIOA program. So we're in the discussionary stages right now. We don't have anything solidified until hopefully this afternoon we'll have some things solidified, but that's kind of where we are. So we really do want people really prepared as they walk out the gate, that they do have a little more direction in that arena. So Laura, if you wanted to add to that, please.
Just in thinking it through, I'm not sure that we're prohibited from doing an enrollment while somebody is still incarcerated. I know we typically do wait till they're released. So I'll have to find out if there's a rule that says we can't, or if it's just something we haven't typically done, and verify. But the main thing to do to prepare is just to do an Idaho Works enrollment. That's kind of the information that we need to have. And I know there's often problems with internet access while people are incarcerated. So like what Tim said, just, you know, getting everything set up to be able to do it as soon as somebody's out is usually the easiest way to do that. But I do want to check and see if we can do it beforehand and just know, and that could really ease the process if it is a possibility.
And what you had said, Laurel, on the enrollment in Idaho Works currently, that is something that we cannot do in the prison because of the internet. However, we are working on getting internet for inmates in the prison. I don't have a timeline on that, but I know that's something that we are actively working on, as well as we're actively working on creating an internal web page for inmates. And we're also working on having one for them on the outside as well. So there's a lot going on in that regard right now, and it's going to happen, but I don't have a timeline on it, but we are working on it. The internet potentially could be, I'm not going to say by the end of the year, but I know we're actively working on that, and it's going to be a lot sooner than what people are anticipating. So we're
active. We're active right now, Tim.
For inmates?
We have it's an additional internet link that we connected for education, and that's what we'll be using. It is active, and we are using it for a couple things right now. It's not fully in play, but the link is active.
Okay, and eventually we'll have it in every one of our facilities. for people to be able to do, job search, education, apprenticeships, all kinds of cool stuff. So again, the department is really, really working hard to make some pretty significant changes that is going to benefit people when they walk out the gate. So we're working on stuff.
So I think that brings up a interesting conversation for those of you that have transitional housing. Is internet available for these guys? I know, especially with COVID, I mean, we're all meeting here in a Zoom meeting because we can't get together. How are those people going out trying to find a job right now today if they don't have internet access?
So I know at Safe Release, we have internet in all of our houses available unlimited for all of our guests to use.
We also have internet for them to use in our house also. And we also have a binder with a list of businesses that are hiring and applications for them that's already in there. So they can just look through that, see what's interesting to them, fill it out, and then take it into the store from there.
That's awesome. Do they have devices? I know somebody mentioned they were working on getting them cell phones on day one. Do they have devices where they can actually, I mean, almost every place I know of, their applications are all online.
We have internet in all of our houses, and we also have a computer lab within our offices that they can come down and use at any time as well.
We have a computer in our main house, and we also have a lady that was on Susan Court that's been working with St. Vincent's de Paul Reentry of getting the track phones for them to be able to hook up with the internet to get Google Voice to where they can have a phone number. They can have internet off of that to work off as well.
I think you had mentioned that before, Tim, about the phones on the first day. I think we've seen the commercials where people who qualify for food stamps qualify for subsidized phones. Is that something that has come along at all?
So right now we do work a lot with St. Vincent de Paul, and they do the phones. I know that we've talked about it as an agency on the cell phone thing, and that again is a topic of discussion that is currently ongoing. I know that the director does see the need and supports that, but where that's going again, I don't know. A lot of it's budgetary is part of it, but yeah, the discussions have been ongoing.
And just to add to that, they will qualify for a phone through their food stamps approval. It takes months to get. We have tried to expedite that process. So St. Vincent de Paul really has been amazing to work with. But I've had people get out in that same day. They've had phones donated, and then they'll go and either help them get set up through some type of carrier. If that person has any money, it's a little easier. If not, then yeah, they can do Google Voice and make it so it still works when connected to the internet. And it's just been amazing. So St. Vincent de Paul's been working really hard on that. But as far as the food stamp phone, it just takes a long time.
That's good to hear. I know that they are doing a lot, and they're in the same building as you, so that's really helpful.
Yeah, they're right next door. But we also, in our one-stop center, we do have a couple of computers that for folks if they needed to use it for job search and that kind of a thing, that when we're fully operational again, right now we're still not fully operational, but we've allowed people to come in one or two at a time to use our computers now. But with COVID, obviously, there's some restrictions based on state government, but they're available for people for job search and to sign up for the, food stamps and all that kind of thing too. So again, we try to help people the best that we can.
I know that the last time that we talked about that, one of the questions I had, and maybe District Manager Lynch is a great person to have on this Zoom for this, is that the computers that are in the one-stop center, if you are a sex offender, that you have to get specific permission from your parole officer in order to use them. And I was just wondering if there was a way to eliminate that barrier, since it is in the one-stop center and it is right there in a public spot where you're not going to be looking at anything without people noticing what you're looking at. Is there a way to reduce that barrier and just say, if you're at the one-stop center, it doesn't matter what your conviction is, you can use this computer?
Hey,
I'll
Tim,
jump in on this.
what,
I'll jump in on this one.
Tim,
Oh.
what did you and Karen work out with that?
So basically what we do is we have a form that we have a registered sex offender or sex offenders complete. And the reason that we have the form is because sometimes in an individual's court order, the judge has stated no internet period based on the offense. And so what the form basically is getting the PO to approve it so that the PO knows what is in that court order. That's why we have the form that we need them to fill out. So you're right, they can't go places because people are watching, but because we don't have the court order, we don't know, you know, what's in there. That's why we have them fill out the form. And a lot of the times it's a protection for them, because if they violate their court order based on a judge, they're going to get themselves in trouble. This way, it's just a precautionary and a safety measure for the individuals themselves. So that's why we have them complete that form.
Is that something that is relatively quick?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, what is it, Annie? You've experienced it more than I have. It's not a.
It's literally an agreement, and then it talks about the rules of the computer, and then it just says like you're able to, or that you've talked to your PO about using the computer here, and they just sign it. So it's just an agreement saying that they've talked to their PO about using the computer. It's honestly, everyone kind of fills it out anyway, because it's also an agreement with what the computers are going to be used for, right? Like looking for jobs, looking for housing. So basically everyone fills it out.
So are we talking about two separate things, or are we talking about the same thing? So
Yeah,
this
so
agreement at one
yeah.
stop is a computer use agreement, which I think makes sense. Is there a separate form for sex offenders that has to be sent off, or is that all included in one thing?
It's all included in one thing.
Perfect. One of the things that was mentioned before is, and I've experienced this myself, so you get out of prison and you go run around and get the things you need. You go get your driver's license, you go get your social security card. And by the time that happens, you know, you've been out a few days at best. And so you go to get a job, and the likelihood of getting a job on the first day is not likely. It might take you a few days. And even if you get hired, you know, right as soon as you get out, then there's going to be a few days before you can do your onboarding and things like that. And so it feels to me as if people who are released kind of start with a delay. And sometimes that delay can be a lot longer than other people. Sometimes it can just be a few days. But when you start earning, you're going to get a paycheck 2 or 3 weeks down the road. You're never going to be able to really pay for your next month's rent that way. And I do know that the IDOC does a second month's rent if necessary, and there's a process for that. But I am just curious, you know, since it does sound like the stress of getting employment and the stress of making that second month's rent, is there funding? Is there a discussion going on about just saying we can do 2 months rent, or we can reduce the barrier to that second month's rent? Or is there no funding for that? Is there a discussion going on about that? Maybe Tim, you know?
There's no discussion going on right now about a second month of rent because of the fact that it's very cost prohibitive. So last year we spent just over $800,000 in transitional funding. The year before that we spent $1 million in transitional funding. And for us to do secondary months, you're gonna increase that to, you know, based on last year it'd be 1.6 million. The year before that you're talking 2 million. That's just cost prohibitive unless legislation wanted to, you know, authorize and approve and give us that money, which I really don't see that as something that legislation is going to do because budgets are very tight. So I really don't see that as something that's going to happen. One of the things that we are trying to do that's going to be resubmitted this year in legislation is the reentry savings program. And the reentry savings program hopefully will be able to eliminate the need for so much money because there's going to be a savings program. A lot of people actually, you know, when they walk out the gate, they do have some money or they've sent some money home to a family member. And therefore, that's part of the concern is they walk out the gate without the money because they've sent it to somebody. We're trying to get it to where they can do some savings, where they can't touch it while they're incarcerated, so they can have it for reentry and to help pay their rent and other necessities as they walk out the gate. So we understand that's a need, and I know, again, Representative Winthrop and I have had this conversation. She really believes that we ought to pay for 3 months. And I told her, I said, you know what? If legislator wants to give us the money, we'll pay for 3 months, but out of the DOC budget, we just don't have that kind of funding.
And I'll add to that and just say that the WIO program, rent is included as a supportive service that we can pay. We can't do it on an ongoing basis, but if it's a one-time thing and we can demonstrate the need for the participant, we can do rental assistance for our adult dislocated worker and youth programs. And then we have a separate grant for recently incarcerated veterans where supportive service rent is included. We can do that for a few months at a time. So if they're a veteran who's in transition, definitely send them to the Department of Labor. We are looking for more participants in that grant as well. A little bit behind on spending for that too, so funding available there. And then for our other funding streams, it is a possibility. We just have to demonstrate the need, and it has to be a one-time thing. So it's not specifically allocated to second month's rent, but we could do that.
So I had a meeting with Boise city officials a few weeks ago because I really love the idea of their Housing First initiative and just the model of having people in a facility, preferably a newer facility with modern amenities, and having supportive services there, and a way to replicate that for people coming out of incarceration. And one of the takeaways from there that changed my mind on some things actually was that, well, first of all, that they didn't have the money in the city coffers that could be used specifically for housing, transitional housing for people coming out of incarceration, because they don't technically meet the definition of homeless. But the discussion for them was that they would rather focus on long-term housing rather than transitional housing. And I thought, well, I guess in a world that's perfect, I would love to see people get out of prison and know, oh, I'm actually going to go somewhere where I can stay. And it's not just temporary where I've got to move on in a few months. And so I was thinking, I know there are some places that do that, and they usually are places that have transitional housing as part of their portfolio. And they say, you know, you come into our program and you do really well, and we'll put you over in one of our long-term rental properties. And so I'm wondering if, is that something that anybody that's currently involved in housing has thought about or knows of other programs that are doing that successfully? And do you think that the stability of that housing model would benefit people coming out of incarceration?
I feel that it'd benefit them, but with the cost of housing right now, it's very hard to get step-down houses. I know with one of our houses, it went from $145,000. Now it's at almost $400,000 to get the same house 5 years down the road. So the cost of living here in Boise, I know, has tripled. So that's something that we've looked at, but that doesn't look like in the near future that that's going to happen, just with the cost of living.
I will say that I've talked to a couple of individuals that are considering purchasing property both in Ada and Canyon County that will be able to offer something like that, where there's a part of it that's transitional housing and a part of it would be more permanent residence housing. So there's discussions that are going on right now. I've had discussions in the last couple of months with 3 individuals that are looking to do something like that. So there's discussion going on about that. One of the things that I would like help with is I would like to be able to talk to some apartment owners, property management companies and whatever, because right now one of the problems is that anybody that has any kind of a felony, it's very, very difficult for them to find any other place to live. And that's part of why transitional houses are full, because people have nowhere to go to, you know, when they move out from the transitional houses, because a lot of these apartment complexes won't rent to them. So that's something that, again, I've talked to 2 representatives and said, hey, is there any way that you can help me to get in touch with, or whatever, with some of these property management companies? They'll take the $40 application fee, knowing that they're not going to rent to these people because of the felony. So I think houses, rentals in general, I think that needs to be something that needs to be discussed, and we need some help with that.
I think there might be a great collaboration opportunity there with Jesse Tree, perhaps, because so I'm interning with them this year as part of my studies with Boise State, and you know their main goal is to keep people who are housed, and so they do some assistance with that. But they have a lot of outreach with landlords, and we're actually putting together sort of a, I guess you'd call it a survey for landlords, and I think there might be a great opportunity to just do some outreach, at least from their point of view, to say, is this something that you would consider? Because like I said in one of those slides, 34% of the people that come across Jesse Tree's desk have a barrier that is a criminal conviction. So I definitely see that as a problem. And I think when there's so many people that you could rent to in Boise or across the Treasure Valley now, because everybody who can't afford to live in Boise is moving to Nampa or Caldwell, that there is a discussion to be had with these landlords to say, okay, we know you have 27 applications on your desk for different housing units. Would you be willing to give it a shot to make some of those available to people with incarceration? I know there are some programs, St. Vincent de Paul here in Coeur d'Alene, where I'm at right now, they do a program where they basically co-sign with the landlord. And so if there's any damage, there's anything that happens with the person that has a conviction that lives there, St. Vincent de Paul will cover it, and they've guaranteed it. And maybe there's some opportunity there where an organization will say, yeah, we understand that there are risks and we're willing to underwrite those risks. So I definitely think there's a conversation to be had there, and I would love to get with you a little bit more about that for sure.
So with Jesse Tree, I only know, I've tried to send people there before, but usually to get help with them, they have to already be in a rental agreement. Is that correct? Like, and it needs to, like a lease agreement, I guess. So a lot of the people at the transitional houses usually can't get any financial assistance with them because they don't have an actual lease agreement. That's a lot of the feedback I've gotten from the people on my caseload.
So with Jesse Tree, they have to be there 3 months and show that they've been there 3 months prior to getting help. They will help with transitional housing, but they have to prove that they've been in the housing for 3 months.
Okay, thank you.
But I definitely think that they have a database of contacts with landlords and things like that that might be valuable in having, you know, that conversation going forward.
You know, I've started a partnership with some property managements over in Caldwell. There's some funding that's going out for new apartments that through Idaho Housing and Finance, that they have to do a certain percentage of apartments for low income, and that I'm working with some apartment managers over there that we do case management, and we actually do the referrals to them. And you know, I mean, they still have to be real careful about who they put in there, but we've got several people that have felony records, and right now I've got 7 apartments over there, and all 7 of them have felony record people in them, and we're doing real well with them. So that might be something to look at in the future. I'm continuing to work with them. I think that this is kind of a funding source for people building apartments, that this is, you know, they get this break because of adding so many percentages for this population. So I think that's something we need to kind of look at a little bit closer, because I know that these guys over in Caldwell are really pushing. They're actually looking to build another one, so I'm looking to pick up 3 more apartments. So it's something that we might think about in the future.
Do you think that the case management aspect of that is the key component to that? Because that's what sticks out to me, is if you stick someone in this housing, they want to make sure that somebody's kind of following up with them. Yeah,
it's actually part of the funding. They have to have the case management, monthly case management, and being able to step in there if there's an issue, be able to step in and work with the property manager and the resident to try to, you know, figure out what's going on, what's the best for both ends, and it's worked out pretty well so far. We've had a couple hiccups, but it's really worked out pretty well so far. And I've actually sent a lot of our veterans over there that's come out of our veterans program. So it's, and like I say, it's working.
I really like that. That sounds like goals right there. Can we expand on programs like that?
And if we could, as transitional housing, could get a list of some of those places for when our guests are ready to move on, that they have those to be able to go and apply at. I know Riverside here in Boise will rent to felons as well, but you have to be out over 3 years of your conviction. So if we can get something emailed to us, if anybody knows those resources of places that they can apply to and not be turned down immediately, and them taking the $40 for their application fee and discouraging them after they've applied for 4 or 5 places for $40 and losing that over and over again, that would be very helpful as well for us to place in our homes for them to look at.
I seem to recall in one of my meetings there was a discussion about eliminating application fees when landlords know they're not going to rent to someone. So if someone applies and you know that they don't qualify for your criteria, you're going to deny them. You still take their $40 application fee. And I'm just wondering if you know anything, anybody out there knows anything about whether there are regulations against that, or that prevent landlords from taking money for application fees for people that they already know they're not going to rent to.
I will say that I know that they're not supposed to automatically not rent to somebody that has a felony by law, but there's no teeth in the law. And I've talked to a property manager who has told me that's an ongoing issue in Idaho, that people actually will take the money knowing they don't, but there's no teeth in the law, so therefore they get away with it. They're not supposed to, but they do it.
That's happened. It happened a little bit when I was in Nampa as the CRC manager, and so we just didn't use those folks with our residents as they were releasing to look for rentals. We chose other options for them, which is difficult sometimes because those resources are limited. And David, I don't know if you know about, or if the group knows about, the expanded CRC program. Have you heard about that?
I have, but I doubt anybody else is as up to date as I am.
Mind if I update the group on that?
Absolutely, go for it.
So one of the things, in part because of the discussions that we're having now, that leadership talked about, is the director researched and found out that he has releasing authority from our facilities. And in discovering that, CRCs are kind of tied to that statute. So what he instructed, and we just finished that policy, it's in front of our DAGs right now. So it should be implemented. I would say, I've been saying this for a while, but it's really close, and I think it should be, I would say in the next 2 to 4 weeks, we're going to launch it. So what the expanded CRCs are, they are existing CRCs where we have residents, and if they've been there at least 1 month, we can then, let me give you a little background first. When we bring people to the facilities for work release, we try to get them about 18 months prior to their tentative parole date or their full-term release date. So we bring them into the facilities, we get their driver's license, social security cards. If they don't have them, and oftentimes they do. And then we get them, we have an employment coordinator that works with their resumes and their applications and that process to get them employed. What this expanded CRC policy does is the remaining 6 months of an 18-month work release, we can put them into the expanded CRC program, which allows them to go home to their residence. They're still tied to our facilities. They're not on parole. They're still in our custody, but they can finish out that remaining 6 months at their home. or the approved residents. They'll have their own PO. They continue to work with the CRC in terms of medications and health benefits and stuff like that. So we are starting, as soon as this policy gets to us, with 5 people from every CRC. So and then up to 30. So once we have the Twin Falls CRC online, which we take possession of October 12th, and we'll start moving offenders into on the first week of November. Once we get full force or up to full capacity, we will have at least 30 people from each CRC and the Unit 1 female facility in Pocatello, which is 180 offenders home and working from home while still tied to our facilities. So that actually has basically, we will have opened another CRC without ever having to have a brick and mortar building. Plus it gets them home with their families. It reduces, they're not paying that 35% to us. They still will have to pay some of their fees in terms of restitution and child support, those types of things that are court ordered by statute. But that's one of the things I think the director and Bree have really worked on a lot to answer some of the issues that we've been having. So as we increase community reentry centers, those numbers will also increase, but right now we're looking at about 30 people per facility. We'll start out with 5, kind of feed them out, work out any kinks. You know, any launch of any new program, you always have a couple of things that you didn't forecast or anything like that. So we're super excited about that on our side of the house. We've got the POs lined out in those districts, with the CRCs are ready to go. Medical's on board, so we're ready to launch. We're gonna let the employers know that we're doing that. So that's one of the things, in answer to the issues, some of the issues that you guys have been mentioning, that the probation and parole side of the house have just launched. We've been working on it for about 6 months, I guess. So, and I'll take any questions if you guys have any questions on any of that.
So one of the things that I think I remember seeing or talking to Bree Derrick about was they have to go to a residence, not to transitional housing, right?
Correct.
Okay.
At this point, that's how that policy is written.
That's actually a pretty quick turnaround for such a major policy change.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty impressed that that's going to be happening so soon.
We had a little bit of fire under us to get that going and get it out pretty quickly, so. No, I know I couldn't have explained it all well. So, but if you have any questions as we go, just feel free to ask or email me.
I know when I saw the flyers for that, I thought, whoa, because that's such a shift in thinking. I mean,
I'll tell you though, this leadership, when we bring that up, and one of the things that was discussed is, well, we should GPS them. And this is where I'm really kind of proud of the department right now, where we've gotten. And the comments were, why? We don't GPS them when they release the from the, or not when they release, but when they're at the CRC, we don't GPS them. So I think we are moving away and have moved away from finding what people are doing wrong to how to help them and identify those things that they're doing right that are making them more successful and productive people in our communities, which of course they are. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you, because that's 180 people around the state that we're going to have out, that which allows 180 people to come from our institutions to get them into the CRCs. So it just has that ripple effect. And I know that you all know this, but when we bring people into our facilities, and this is kind of backtracking to what you had asked, David, reentry needs to start at the day that they come into our facilities. But that's the day reentry starts. And those things like Social Security cards and birth certificates, because that's the tail end of it. Sometimes you got to go back and get their ID cards and Social Security cards. Sometimes you have to go back and get their birth certificates. all those things we're identifying on the front end, so as we get people through the system, hopefully, and I think with what Tim's group is doing as well, and getting those things, those IDs, those I-9 issues will be resolved long before they leave the facility. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
I know that the last conversation I had with the director, he talked about making sure that everyone leaves with their driver's license, social security card, and birth certificate, because most people are going to be there long enough that you have the time to sort all that out and get it for them. The problem is that, you know, sometimes things like birth certificates cost money. And so for him, it was like, how do we have this conversation with Vital Statistics so that they just send it over? We're another government agency. Can we have some sort of arrangement that makes that a lot simpler? And so it's great to hear those sort of thoughts, because, you know, I have a 6'9" number and there's, I don't know what you're at right now, 130 plus. So there's a lot of people that have come into the system over time that never saw any of this stuff, just because there was a different focus. And the evolution of the department over time has been fascinating to see. You know, you've seen it. Things have changed a lot, but I definitely think that there's been a greater momentum in the last 2 years than ever before. Like Kevin Kemp and his world kind of sped things up, but I think there was still a different dynamic when he was in charge that sort of kept it from gaining terminal velocity, but I kind of feel like we're there now. And so it's great to see some of these conversations going on.
I agree with you, David. And the other part is that you had asked about whether or not folks should pay for that, or if the state should pay for it. I think any individual that if they have the ability to pay for that, that's their skin in the game and they can pay for that. But never should lack of funding prevent us from allowing them to get their social security card or their birth certificate or their ID. And I think that's one of the things, and that's been a shift that's been happening for a while, and that's where we're at now. So if they don't have the funds, if they do, that's awesome. But if they don't, we shouldn't punish them by not allowing them to get those things. It really just hinders the entire system when we do that.
I've heard that skin in the game pitch before somewhere.
Probably.
That's Josh's terminology last time I talked to him. The problem that I see, and I think this is a great conversation to have for corrections, but also for housing, because people have lack of coping mechanisms. Their coping was, I don't have money, I'm going to steal stuff. I'm not happy with how things are going, I'm going to get high. I don't have any marketable job skills, I'm going to go join a gang or something where I can do all sorts of other things for my income. And so there's just a lot of people who, I don't know what you would call it, I'm at a loss of words for it, but I think that it's a failure to cope with normal life, and so you resort to all sorts of other things. And so I often think, and I know there's a conversation about this going on for the future of corrections, is how do you teach people to be normal? And so this normalization conversation about the future, I know the guys out at Oryx are loving, you know, washing their own laundry and just being able to pick up a phone and make a phone call and things like that. So I know there's a conversation about installing kitchenettes at some of the facilities so people cook food and do their own laundry and things like that. And so I just wonder, we're not really doing that in many places now. CRCs are the closest we come to that. There are a lot of people who qualify for CRCs that don't ever get to go to them because we don't have enough of them, in my opinion. But then we release them. So they go to these transitional homes, and if they're lucky, the transitional home cares enough to help them with some of those things. But I don't think that right now we're doing as much as we can systemically from front end to back end on life skills. And so I would really love to see more of a discussion on that over time and to see how that evolves. Because if I go to a halfway house, this is, you know, I speak from my own personal experience. I go to a halfway house, they never came and checked on me. They just collected my rent. I lived in a room with someone else, bunk bed style, which felt a lot like a prison cell, but with carpet. No one was keeping tabs on me at all, except the parole officer, who, it was random. I mean, he's got 100 people. So I might have to go to his office. He might show up at midnight at my house to just do a check. Who knows? But no one's teaching me how to save money, how to set up a bank account, or how to cook food when you're just used to ramens. And I know that there is some, how to balance your checkbook and things like that going on in there. And I know there's discussions about expanding that. And I'm sure that a lot of that has actually been stalled because no one can leave their cells and go to the classrooms where those were going to be offered. But I definitely think that that is one of the core components to making sure that the cycle is broken at the reentry level, is making sure that people actually have the skills to do normal stuff, because we don't. A lot of us don't. I know I went in at 19, I got out at 27. And the Department of Corrections at that time was not geared towards that sort of stuff. At your very best, you might go to the farm or CRC at some point in your career and have a job that actually paid some sort of a semblance of a wage. And so then you could save some money and do some things like that. Go out in the community every day and have a job. But as far as teaching you, like, life is kind of boring. I sometimes feel that the mundane is where we find the beauty and release, but we're not really teaching people that mundane is the goal. The goal is to get out and spend your Sundays at home enjoying the fact that you don't have to go to work, and washing your laundry and washing your dishes and cooking food that's not out of a box and things like that. And so I definitely would love to see more of a drive from the department in encouraging transitional housing providers to do that, because I know some of them do and a lot of them don't. Was that a lot of words?
No, you're good. Tim and I just actually had this conversation Wednesday driving back from Twin Falls and looking at the CRC there. And he's recruiting people to come in and basically rewrite some of our pre-release stuff to include real life scenarios, not pie in the sky stuff that really aren't going to relate to anybody in any situation when they get out. But Tim, I'll let you talk more about that. But it was one of the things that it's ironic that you said that, because we just had that discussion 2 days ago.
Tim's always a step ahead of me.
No, I think kind of with what Bruce is saying, what's important is that we have a lot of folks that come in, that do need what you're talking about. And we're in the process now of we started before COVID. COVID kind of stopped us, but we're going to rewrite the pre-release program. And a lot of the stuff that you're describing, we need to teach, because we're not teaching that stuff right now in the facilities. So, I've had conversations with some people, to do it virtual. And I don't know what, Annie, what it's called that John was having, the program from D4. I don't know what it's called.
The virtual reality.
Virtual reality. So those are some of the things that we've talked about doing. So again, what I do is I listen to people that have returned to the community from incarceration, and they tell me, hey, Tim, this is what I think we need to do. Here's some thoughts and ideas on what would work. And Bree and I started an advisory council, and we've had a couple of meetings. The majority of them have been, one meeting we had 6, and one we had 8 returning citizens as part of the meeting. And we're listening to people that have lived the experience, and we're trying to make it better. So there's a lot of talk, and there's a lot of things going on that we're making it happen. Those of you that know me know that I don't sit on my hands. I give me a thought and an idea, and then we run with it. So there's a lot going on. Just stay tuned.
You're always saying that. And you're right. Do you think that there is I guess what does that look like exactly as in your conversations?
As far as a rewrite, well, what I want to do is I want to bring some of these returning citizens into the table to help us rewrite it. Tell us, what did you miss? What would have helped you to transition, and try to incorporate some of that into the pre-release classes. Our pre-release class is like 10 years old. It hasn't been revised in depth for a very long time. And some of the material that's taught, just isn't really necessary. And some of the things that need to be taught aren't being taught. So again, it's just, we're making some necessary changes that I believe are going to help people to transition a lot easier. I can't give you what it's going to look like because I really don't know yet. We just have thoughts and ideas, and I'm good at throwing out ideas to people, and some people like them, some people don't. But I joke about it, but I don't have a box. I'm not an out of the box thinker. I just throw out ideas and thoughts, and let's see what we can do to make it work.
And David, just to add what you said, you talked a lot about life skills, and that's come up a lot with just within the reentry center, because I mean, we have people that come in, and I think in our last meeting you had brought up the fact that going into Walmart or Winco the first time and seeing a whole aisle of cereal is so overwhelming. A lot of the guys I talk to will get their groceries from the gas station because it's easier for them to go there than go out in public somewhere like Walmart or Super Center, right? So like Tim said earlier, we just have someone from Easter Seals that's going to be a reentry specialist assistant. And one of the things we really want to work with him on is helping people get their Medicaid set up, and then developing like a grocery list, going through it with them, talking about where to buy, going to the store with them and helping them see like how you interact with people in a grocery store. Because that's hard sometimes when someone looks at you and smiles and you feel like you have this scarlet letter on you that says, I just got out of prison. So that's something we've talked a lot about, and I think we're all really passionate there about moving that needle forward and really helping people kind of navigate that whole new scenery for them.
My former warden, Randy Blades, I think a lot of you know him. He spoke about, after doing a couple of different tours overseas, he was one of the tank commanders in Desert Storm. He said the same exact thing happened to him when he returned to the States, that it was overwhelming for him to go into a grocery store and see so many choices, so many different selections. He said even the colors at a stoplight were overwhelming. And that's somebody, it's, that's not somebody that's been locked up for 20 years.
I think there are people who, I don't know, that are very adaptable. And, but I definitely know from my own personal experience and those from many of the people that I work with on a daily basis, it's, I wouldn't say scary, but overwhelming is a great word for it. I know what I told Annie was I went into Walmart and, you're in there for 7 years and every morning it's French toast this day and pancakes that day, and your options are cold cereal. That is your only other option. So when you get into the grocery store and there's people everywhere and there's 100,000 individual scannable items at a Walmart Supercenter, you just feel like, whoa, how do I choose? And then I do think that you feel like people are looking at you funny, and they may be. There were times that I was walking down the street and I was wearing that jacket that they issue you in prison. That's like the denim jacket, because that's all I had. And someone actually said, hey, did you just get out of prison? And I was like, yeah. And you got like the little adhesive on your jacket that used to be your name tag, but they were generous enough to take it off, but it still looks like there was something there. And so you feel like everyone can see that because you feel maladjusted. I think that that's how I felt, was like, I feel like I'm different. So you all must feel that I'm different. And I know support systems can be really, really important. And I think it took me a while actually before I found mine. So I had gotten out of prison, went to Vineyard Boise because I needed medical care and they had a free clinic. And so really my experience there was just going during this 2-hour window or whatever that they had a clinic and getting some services. But while I was there, I saw that there was this church and they had like a pantry that was going on at the same time, which I didn't need at the time, but I saw it was there and they had this garden. So I ended up going back to prison relatively quickly and not having any further experience there. But when I got back out, I had that in my mind that I want to go to this Vineyard Boise place because it looked kind of cool. So I ended up going back there, and it was like, I don't know, it's a large church, like a lot of churches are, And I loved the anonymity of it because nobody was coming up to me and like forcing themselves on me. And I needed that. I needed to be there, but I didn't want to be brought in or be confronted, or because somebody's going to ask me my story. Oh, who are you? Where are you from? And that's just too many questions. And so it was kind of great to get involved in a church that was that size, and I didn't have to worry about that. Over time, there was some sort of event that they held. It was like a breakfast thing after services that I went to, and then someone just sat down next to me and asked me, you know, the typical questions. Oh, I've never talked to you before. What's your name? What's your story? And I'm from Coeur d'Alene. Well, what brings you to Boise? Well, my story is that I just got out of prison 6 months ago. So that's what brought me to Boise. And I know that there are a lot of people who don't want to go to a church. And so I just wonder, you know, when you get out, what does that support system look like? If you don't have a drug and alcohol problem, which a lot of people do, 50% of people do, I think, you know, then you have probably mandated meetings that you go to. But if you don't have mandated meetings, what do you do? So I definitely think that employment is part of that conversation, housing is part of that conversation, support systems are part of that conversation, life skills are part of that conversation. But for me, that was kind of my experience. Was I'm weird, I feel weird, I don't know any normal stuff because I came in here at 19. Nobody taught me that stuff while I was in there. I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent 3.5 weeks from now, and I don't know what to do. And if I hadn't been so numbed by the prison experience, I might have cried, you know, but even that isn't a thing you do in prison. So you just kind of sit there and just, it's not even autopilot. I don't think that a lot of people get out and they have a plan. It just feels so overwhelming to even formulate a plan.
With that being said about getting out and just crying, we get a lot of our timers that get out that have done 5+ years, and we will get them set up in the room and they will get on a bed and just cry and feel so overwhelmed and kind of be up in the corner and cry and not know what to do. With that being said, a lot of times before they get to our facility, to our house, we ask them to go to the reentry program, to the St. Vincent's reentry program, because that gives them some of those tools, such as was said, a food box, clothing voucher, bus passes, hygiene, those kind of things. The problem that we're having lately that we're seeing is the buses coming from Pocatello. If their family's not picking them up, they're getting here after 5 o'clock, between 5 and 9 o'clock at night, and they're not having any of those resources. So we have in our houses particularly put house food in the houses. We supply all of our houses with a bed in the bag. We have a garage that is filled with clothes that have been donated by the other females or by girls that have absconded. We put them back in and then also take some out to the prison for their closets. But it's very overwhelming when you don't have family and you don't have a support system. You're coming to Boise to be brought back into the community and you have no family. You're not from here. We get a lot of people that right now with the COVID, they can't interstate compact back home. So they're stuck here in Boise and they have no family. They've never been here. They don't know any resources, and they just cry. With us, we are in our housings every day. I'm there every day after 10 o'clock doing house checks, particularly. If they need us during the day, we go there during the day and try to help them with resources. But we are seeing a huge problem with the COVID not being able to do the interstate compacts and girls getting stuck here in Boise until they can go home and not knowing anything or not having those resources after 5 o'clock.
That's actually interesting because I never really had thought about that. So what do you think a solution to that might be? Is there some sort of option to address that when it happens? Is there a way to communicate like with St. Vincent de Paul and say, hey, this person, you know, this is going to probably happen at the case manager level. this person is going to be released on this date and they're coming to Boise and this is their release time. I feel like there is a mechanism for that, that they would take care of them after hours. They're not beholden to office hours. So is that an option, do you think?
Well, kind of like I said, if they're coming from out of state, they don't have family that they have close. So they're coming with what they're released from prison. So a lot of girls that are going in are teeny. They've used their, or males. I work with women particularly, so I don't know about the male side as much, but they come in and their size is completely different from when they're getting released. So they're getting released from clothes from the closet that not necessarily always fit them, and they're coming with one outfit. So no pajamas, no clothes to go the next day, no extra pair of underwear, no extra socks. We supply bedding and we have clothes that we can help them with, but that's a huge concern with them coming out, that they don't have that. So when they get into our housing at 9 o'clock at night, when the bus gets into town from Pocatello, or if the paperwork hasn't been done on the rider, so they have court at 3:30, and when they get the paperwork sent over, it's after 5:30, and so they're getting there at 6, 7 o'clock at night being released, and then coming in. They don't have those reentry programs. They can't go to St. Vincent's de Paul reentry. They can't go to the probation reentry center. So they're just showing up to the house with literally what's on their back and a bag of all their paperwork. And I feel like that's a huge stressor on them, that right there from the very beginning, they're stressed from the very beginning and overwhelmed. So all they can really do is sit down and cry. And we have to sit down and try to help them through that, such as, okay, well, we have house food. You do have blankets and a pillow to lay your head down and cover up with tonight. Let's take you over to our house that does have clothes in the garage, and we can dig through there and see if we have something to have you wear for the evening to be able to sleep in. But if that was taken care of prior to them being released, that might be a huge relief off their shoulder of, okay, well, I do know that I have food to eat tonight. I do have pajamas to go to sleep in. And we are seeing that quite a bit happen since the COVID kicked into place, because right now, since COVID, we can't take clothes out to the closets out at the prison. They weren't receiving them out at the prison right now. I don't know if that's changed since we've changed to yellow here in Ada County, but I know when we were in red, they weren't accepting those donations. So if we could kind of look at some of those, that could help some of the relief. I know St. Vincent's has been a huge, huge help with the cell phone thing. Going there first before they come and check in. Now they know that they have food. Now they know that they have a voucher that they can go get some clothes for the next day.
I think that's all great input. I guess, you know, COVID has thrown a wrench in so many things that we do, and it has unintended consequences. I don't know that anybody expected it to last this long. And what do you do when things last 6 months and you're trying to run a normal program and trying to address people's needs when it lasts this long? I definitely think there could be a conversation about clothes being dropped off and things like that. Is there a way to address that? I think there is.
Go ahead, Jay.
I was going to say, mentioning, you know, the coping skills and where people, you know, return to what they knew. I've often thought that, you know, if we could be more proactive in the prison side, and expand on our vocational training. You know, we typically, you know, have things through some correctional industries, but something that really stands out in my career is watching the transformation of people that were like drug dealers, because drug dealing is not a job, you know, and watching them be proud of something they've done with their hands, and you know, taking them out of the trail crew, just being proud of building a small bridge over a creek. If you haven't heard of it, there's a program that Texas has. It's called PEP. Anybody heard of that? And once again, it's limited. I think they do like 500 a year is all. and PEP stands for Prison Entrepreneurial Program. And what they do is they go through a selection process, and kind of it's kind of a rigorous selection process. And they found out what somebody is very specifically interested in. What things do they like? What things do they know? For instance, I'll walk through a unit and I'll see somebody is drawing on a piece of paper, and he's got an extreme amount of talent. And what a lot of them do with that now is they go out and they become tattoo artists, but that could actually be expanded on. I mean, they could be painting a car with that talent. If anyone's had a car accident, you know how much it costs at a body shop to get your car repaired. But what this program does is it tailor makes what the person is interested in to have them have a successful future when they are released. So, I mean, I'd encourage you just to Google that when you get a chance. Just look up PEP, the Texas PEP, and not that I'm wanting to advocating to copy it completely, but I think that's another big piece of the puzzle. That if we could work on that from the prison side, I've often been out in that our motor pool, and I thought, why isn't this a vocational program out here? Why aren't we teaching people to be mechanics? Why aren't we getting them ASC certified? I visited the Pendleton prison last year, and every prison in Oregon uses a Prius for their outside patrol vehicle. And anytime something goes wrong with that Prius, and they're a fairly complex vehicle, they send them to Pendleton, and inmates rebuild them. And that's a skill that they can take out to the streets, so that they're not returning to their norm that they know. It may not address everything, but I think it's another piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely. So I know that. Go ahead, Jenny.
One other thing that we see coming out is medication, mental health medication. Some girls come out with 30 days worth of medication, and some girls come out with what they have in their pop packets. And once they run out of that medication, trying to get into a doctor in that time to get refilled has not always been the easiest thing. So then we end up with mental health problems. We get a lot of girls that have schizophrenia and schizoaffective, bipolar, so on and so forth. And not having the proper mental health set up prior, such as doctor's appointments, that you're going to follow up with this doctor at this time, is, I feel like, a stressor to them, such as their mental health. Because mental health, if that's not taken care of, you're off the railroad tracks from the very beginning. So I think that that's something we need to look into, is such as setting up a follow-up appointment within that week to make sure that we can continue with medication immediately afterwards, and a doctor, and not having to wait 30 days to get into a doctor because you're a new patient.
Well, they are supposed to be getting released with 30 days of medication. And I'm not sure if this is new or if this is old, but that's another unintended consequence that's happened with COVID is there's been some accelerated releases. The Parole Commission has actually taken a look at a lot of the ones that had already been previously given a date or were soon to be released, and they actually sped up their process. And a lot of times it came with very, very little warning, and they were not able to obtain, the Horizon was not able to obtain the 30 days of medication before they were released. This is actually the first time I've heard of that happening, but I do know that they are supposed to be going with 30 days of medication to give them a transition time to get a new provider and prescriptions.
Yeah, Jay, I can elaborate a little bit on that. So when they leave our facilities, they should be leaving with 30 days and a script for 30 days as well. So it should give them that 60-day cushion. And if that's not happening, we do need to know that, because that is a contractual thing that they should be leaving with. And we'll address that, because that, especially with people that are on psychotropics or, you know, other medications, they really cannot have that break in treatment. So,
yeah, that could be disastrous.
absolutely. And that could be where we start to lose them if they end up coming off that medication either because they can't get it or they can't afford it. So we've
Right.
got resources for that, and I'm sure Tim could even speak to that, but they should be leaving with that 30 days and then a script for 30 days. So it should be a 60-day cushion.
And I can see if they're out front to be released and they don't have that medication, they don't want to say anything because they want to go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I guess a good question for that is if someone comes into one of these facilities and that didn't happen, and you know it's the next day, and that's something that needs to be addressed, have we now left? We've now left the facility, so we're not going to contact the facility to take care of that. We're out the gate. Who do we contact? Do we contact Amy Mabe and say, hey, there was
guy. It's at my facility, call this guy, and I'll walk right down to the HSA.
Yeah, I just wonder, is that the follow-up?
You know, I would say contact somebody that, you know, that can make an immediate action on it, you know, so Amy Mabe might be the good one to contact on that, but
and I'm even good with people.
I got a call from somebody in my facility, I'd act on it right away.
Yeah. So I have discovered that with this position came a little bit more juice than I had when I was just a CRC manager. So if that happens and I get that call, I'll certainly address it, and they'll have that sort within 24 hours. I can almost guarantee that. Because that's just something that just cannot happen.
So you guys are all hitting on like my heart and soul right now. I work in healthcare, and what would it look like, or what would it take to be able to set them up with a provider before they ever leave? Why can't we get them set up with an appointment, and that, you know, the 30-day supply and a 30-day script and a follow-up appointment with a provider before they ever left the facility?
So typically, if they're on those types of meds, they qualify for what's called the Terry Riley Burn Grant, and they take over that. So they make sure that they get the meds that they need. So we work with a lady named Philomena. She's really great at setting up their appointments. And typically she'll do it's been weird with COVID, so I think she does a phone call now before they're released just to finish up the paperwork. And then they have an appointment scheduled that first week they're out. So if that's not happening, I mean, they can call the reentry center too, because I mean, I talk to Philomena all the time. And so even if they get missed, she's able to set an appointment up with them right away, like way less than 30 days. And then with everyone qualifying for Medicaid, they do it over the phone now, and that's done within 24 hours. So they get approved over the phone, and then 24 hours after that phone call, it's active. So they can come to our office and even use the computer to find their primary care doctor, establish care somewhere, and get their a doctor appointment set up. And then they qualify for Medicaid transportation as well.
Jay, do you know if in the institutions that the case managers, as somebody's approaching proximity to release, go over that stuff, maybe give them a resource list, or even schedule some of the follow-up appointments for them? I know we do that on the CRC side of the house, but it's been so long since I've been in the facilities, I don't know how we do it with the case management. Or Tim, maybe you know.
Yeah, what I will say is that there are some case managers who are extremely proficient at doing a lot of that. And one of the things that we've done is we've done kind of like a requirement C-note entry at the release time that kind of has all those things they have to answer that show that they've actually done that. We have some case managers that put their heart and soul into it and take a lot of pride in seeing that there's lots of follow through, and they'll even go above and beyond, you know, with helping with other things as well. While others, you know, it's just like anything else, is that some of them we have to hold their feet to the fire to get them to do that. And so it comes with some accountability. I think Tim McKay is really an advocate for having those box checked and having that C note in there that has all the finalized questions as they're being released. And So that's something that we're working on, is just the better consistency with that. In the past, it didn't have that C note. Seemed like such a simple answer, but some of the answers, sometimes the answers are right in front of you, and we just didn't, never thought of it. But that's a requirement now, is that they put that final C note in it that has all this criteria in it that they answer. So there's like a mandatory minimum they have to do before they get released. But I can't.
So easily audited, Jay. I mean, if you take the last 20 releases that you've had and just go in and randomly look, that's going to give you a lot of information on that. So, I mean, that's how I did it anyway. I like to audit. I trust, but I verify.
Exactly.
So,
Well, and the case notes, Jay, that you're talking about are on the probation side of the house as well, so that the POs will be able to have access to that information. Because what was happening before is a lot of that information never got out, and POs didn't have any idea of what was required. And so that's where those case notes are going, is under the reentry summary, under the PO side of the house. And I was going to say too, that one of the things, if people have issues and they can't get a hold of, Amy or whatever, in my mind, they need to tell their PO, and their PO needs to act on that as well, to be able to get them in touch with the right person to get that process, corrected as well. Because they're supposed to be there to help the individual. And if that's something that's really desperately needed, that's what a PO is there to do, is to help them.
I have had a call about medication in the past, and each time that I've had, I can't remember how many times, but I remember one in particular calling down to my health services administrator, and they said, yeah, we have the medication here, but they're gone. And so now what we had to do is had to line up tying them together to get the medication to them. So
go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, if they leave and they're not there for Corizon to give the medication, I highly doubt they're going to be raising a flag down there. Let's track them down.
So that's kind of what we've ran into, them getting to the house, and then by nighttime when they're supposed to take their medication, they're like, we don't have our medication. So we're calling out to the prison and going back out to South Boise to pick up medication from the nursing staff. I think that it's important to know that that's one thing that they do have when they're relieving, is their medication with them. Because a lot of them can't sleep at night. They have PTSD and they have nightmares at night to where they can't sleep. So then they're up all night, and that's a trigger itself of when they were on drugs, they're up for days. I think it's very important that we make sure that their medication is in their release bag with them. Because particularly, I know myself, I've gone out to South Boise on numerous occasions just to pick up medication for girls that have been released. And yes, it is on them as well, and it's their responsibility to make sure that they have that, because they're going to have to continue to do that out here on their own. But that's not, like you said, their first thought. Their first thought is getting out of there and not looking back.
Well, I want to be really mindful of everybody's time and respectful of your time. We said we would be done at 10:30. I think there's definitely more that we could discuss, and I would love to discuss, but I definitely don't want to go past our time. I know that we'll be sending out a survey in the next couple of days about this event, like we did on the last event, and just discuss some of the components and see if this worked out well, if the timing was right. We had a discussion about that before. Is Friday morning a good time, or would you have rather done it like Saturday afternoon again? Or what are the important things that we should be discussing? What is the topic? The next one I think is definitely going to be employment. I think that's a huge part of successful reentry. But it'll just have all sorts of different things that you can provide some feedback and let us know what you thought and what we can do to improve and where the conversation goes from here.
Well, I appreciate the forum for having the conversation and you including us in this, David, so thank you.
I think it's always seems really informational to everyone.
Yeah.
They take something away, and I feel like if all you took is just one little chunk away, then we have done something to advance the conversation. So thank you for coming. Eddie?
I would like to just add, you know, we get these good conversations going and then time's up and we all have to move on. But I would like to see us do something to offer some real solutions for collaboration. That how can we bring the general public into this conversation, and you know, bring the general public and the transitional housing owners in connection with IDOC and the reentry organizations and all of that, and start putting together some real plans about how we can work together and make this a better thing for those people getting out.
I definitely think it can be hard
Project
to
team
have
with some goals and
it can be hard to have the conversation, because I know for us, we took every housing provider on the IDOC's transitional housing list and sent an email, just like you all got and responded to the address for their application submissions. But we also researched, I know I researched all of the owners of these businesses, or just the housing locations on that list, whichever I could find. If they had a parent company, I would send it to their offices. But we sent out a postcard that said, this is what's going on and this is how you access it. And we made it really easy. So this Zoom was not like you have to register or pre-register. It was literally like, go to barnone.org/housing, and there's just a link that will take you right in. Or like if you responded through the email, you can go right in that way. And you see how many transitional housing providers responded. And so I just wonder, what is the mechanism and the method to get people to come to the table? Because I think that has been something that we've just tried to do before, and it's hard to actually get people to pull the trigger. There were a lot of tentative responses to the meeting, and so I'm just wondering, how do you get people in the seats to have the conversation? Because the conversation is great with 18 people, but would it be even better if there was 48 people? I like to think so. So if you have any thoughts on that, we would love to hear that.
Well, I know that we got a lot of information out of here that can help our guests in our house, and it was very informational for you guys, letting us know how we can try to work with them and what resources. I did not know about the job services. I didn't know about a lot of different things. So we were able to take a lot in from you guys. So it was very helpful. I think that if some of the other transitional housings can get into these meetings and learn, they might be more willing to come in more often and get information as well, because everybody brings a different options to the table that we could use for our housings to be able to help these girls be successful.
And money tends to drive people. So maybe what you would do is say in there, benefits to you could increase your referrals, or something like that. And then people's ears will prick up and they go, I kind of want to be part of that if my referrals are going to increase. Or at least I found that to be true in the past.
Whatever it takes, right?
Exactly right.
I'm glad you mentioned referrals and not just, hey, we'll pay you $10 to attend.
Exactly.
Gift card giveaway.
I want to thank you for inviting me. I think prisons should actually be more involved in this. Personally, I'm speaking from the guilty chair. I think prisons so much in reentry has been given a pass in the past that they're not as responsible for reentry as they really should be. And I think we have a leadership in the department right now that sees it a different way. And I think that they would encourage much more participation in the reentry side of it at an earlier stage, which I've always thought is the sooner the better when it comes to reentry, preparing for that. There was a time when if we saw somebody was topping out, we just didn't waste any effort on them. We only worried about the ones paroling out. And with the leadership that we have now, I think we place a strong emphasis on all of those. That we're looking to prevent recidivism, whether they're a topper or a parolee.
Well, I think you actually have a really great perspective, because you were kind of raised up in a different department. And so when I actually encountered you for the first time, or became aware of you, because we didn't really encounter each other, you were a lieutenant at the yard. And that was a different department, it was a different facility, and you were a different person. And so I think the evolution of the department, the evolution of staff, and the evolution of the goal, I think is you're living it. And so I think it's really
learning we're learning all the time. Yeah.
And I think that's great. Bruce, I became aware of you, I think, when you were in charge of PRC.
Oh, wow, that's a while ago.
So, so yeah, I mean, there's people here who have seen the evolution. Tim, you watched it from the outside for a long time. And so you had perspective that people from the inside would never have had when you came in and said, hey, these are the things we talk about when I go out to the farm and I have these conversations with people. This is what they ask. And so you know, everybody has this perspective that's just really great to shaping where we go from here. I think it's awesome. I never thought we would be here 10 years ago, for sure. I never thought I'd be here 10 years ago.
But just stay tuned. We're moving forward, and we're going to get a lot more accomplished, a lot more positive changes to help people as they reenter the community. Because, again, what's already been stated is our leadership is super positive and looking forward, wanting to make a difference. And, you know, like, I know from my perspective, when I make a suggestion and I take it forward, it's like, okay, how can you make that happen? And I'm given free rein to make things happen. So we're moving forward.
But Tim, it does look like they have you in a utility room or something with those boxes. And then Jay, did you end up on the floor of your at your couch, or you look like you're on the floor?
Yeah, I'm sinking.
Okay. I'm not judging, I'm just saying. So.
All right, well, if anybody has anything else to add, now is the time. Otherwise, we can all get back to our Friday TGIF.
No, thank you for the time, our time. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for inviting me.
Look for the follow-up email.
Okay, we'll do. We'll wait for that
Thank you,
too.
guys.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you all.
Have a great weekend.
Take care. Thanks now.